Alright, so here we have new motors from Brotherhobby. This one is from the Avenger series, Avenger V2. So these are 2507 and these are 1200, 1500 and 1750 kV. These are actually update to the original Avenger, so there's some new updates that make this motor much better than the original. So we'll talk about those updates and how they came about. So as usual, I want to thank Brotherhobby for sending these test samples. So Brotherhobby always has been pretty good about sending motor samples just when they first come out, sometimes even before, so I can test them and get some numbers for you guys so you can decide whether the motor will be perfect for your setup. So Brotherhobby's always been good about that. So thank you so much, really appreciate it. So alright, let's see what's in the boxes. So the usual Brotherhobby very simple box, which is good, you know, just cardboard. You don't need anything fancy. Let's open up the 1200 kV, and also as usual there's not much in the box, just the motor and a little baggie with some mounting screws for 3mm arms and a nylock, and this one looks like it's a full size nylock. Don't know if these were sent out of the production batch, because the original ones, as you remember, had a red accent paint, so these are completely black, so I don't know if that's gonna be the color for the production units. So let's have a look at the motor. Looks pretty much the same as the original Avenger, the same design on the spokes, which is pretty cool. It's a 5-spoke pattern, and naked bottom. This looks like it's 16 by 16 mount pattern, so that's pretty good. And the main update on this motor is they went to a 4 by 9 by 4 NMB bearing, so a lot stronger bearing, and they kept the retaining screw there, and that's a 1.5mm screw, and they did use a large head screw, so even though it's 1.5, at least they use a full-size head on there, so there's a lot of area there for the driver so it doesn't slip. So sometimes when they use those really small shallow heads, they'll be very difficult to remove, and you end up messing up the screw before you even take it out, so that's good. And there we see the windings pretty much out of the way on the bottom of the motor, so that's good. There, everything's tucked in, so nothing exposed. The other motors are basically the same, so the only difference is going to be the windings, the number of turns, because that's what determines the kV value for each motor. More turns, lower kV, fewer turns, and it's a higher kV. So there we have them, 1750, 1500 and 1250. So these come with pretty good length of 18 gauge wire, so pretty hefty, pretty beefy wire that'll be able to take any load you put this in. So this is about 180 millimeters of wire, plenty of length for 7-inch arms, because that's what these were updated for. So the main purpose of Brotherhobby updating these motors is that a lot of people were asking for a 7-inch motor that could run on 6S whilst keeping amps low, so that it wasn't a battery killer. So that was the main goal of the updates they did on these motors. Davis from Brotherhobby asked me to check out the power draw on these motors, because they just wanted to confirm that on 7-inch props the draw was going to be lower than 40 amps. It was their goal to have a draw less than 40 for sure at the burst numbers, so that's pretty good, and that would be in flight. They wanted to see something that in flight wasn't going to be some crazy amp draw. So that was the main goal, which I think is pretty good, because if you have a motor that's going to be drawing a lot of amps, it's just going to discharge your battery and even kill them pretty soon. You'll get really bad voltage sag out of the battery. Alright, so let's get a weight on the motor, and that's with 195 millimeters of wire. So that'll come in quite hefty. That wire is pretty heavy, it's 18 gauge. So that comes in at 42 grams with 195 millimeters of 18 gauge wire. So if we were to cut that wire to 50 millimeters, we get rid of that much wire. As you can see, it's going to be quite heavy. That's 18 gauge. That's 435 roughly millimeters of wire. That's nearly 5 grams, 4.8 grams for that much wire if you cut it to 50, which is what I usually do. I get the equivalent weight with 50 millimeters of wire so that all the motors have the same amount of wire. The best way would actually be to, of course, no wire at all, but anyway, that's what I've been doing. So 4.8, we'll tear that with a short wire. That comes into about 37.1. So not a bad weight for such a big motor. You know, it's a 2507. Pretty good weight on that motor. It's not overly heavy. And anyways, when you put 6S on a 7-inch prop with these motors, just a few grams, it's no biggie. We'll see how easy it is to take apart this motor. So hopefully that screw comes out easily. And yeah, it looks like they're using some pretty good Loctite. I can feel the resistance, but if you just do it carefully, make sure you press in, and on one motion you turn, so you don't want to jerk anything, so the driver stays in place, and then you can turn the screw out. Okay, so that's easy to remove. Yeah, there you can see they're using that white thread lock. There's a brass washer there. So let's see, hopefully that comes out. Yeah, it looks like it's gonna come out easily. Good. And it looks like that's a 4 millimeter shaft, and it's hollow all the way through. And Brotherhobby uses the usual recipe for all their top motors. It's a titanium hollow shaft, a 7075 aluminum bell and casing, and also on the base they always go with 7075 aluminum. And on this one, as you can see, they're single strand wire, and they updated the bearings to 4x9x4, which is the proven bearing that's most durable. That's what people like, so they went ahead and changed those. And these are good quality bearings, NMB, so that's good. And let's see, there's no lip on the bell ring, but looks like there's plenty of epoxy there on the magnets, and of course those are N52 magnets. They always stay in place. I haven't seen any slip magnets lately on any of the Brotherhobby motors. Alright, so let's have a closer look under the magnifying glass, and there you can see there's a anti-slip texture on top of the bell here, where the prop is gonna rest, so that's good. And there's the one-piece titanium shaft. As always, top quality from Brotherhobby. And that's the portion where on the version 1 there's some red accent on there, so I'm not sure if that's gonna be the case on the production versions. These are pre-production, so they might change the color scheme, not sure. There's the arc magnets as usual from Brotherhobby, and there's the hollow shaft again. Here's the stator. There's the nice beefy bearings, and as usual, nice job on the windings there, pretty neat. Single strand wire, high temperature wire. So let's get a measurement on that stator. Should be 7 millimeters. So there we go. It looks pretty close to 7 millimeters. That's good. And those are 0.15 lamination. So all the tech features that we've come to expect for motors on this price range. Alright, so that's the tear down of the motor. Let's let's have a look at the air gap right there, and looks like a pretty good air gap. Looks like aimed for smoothness, so it's not ultra tight. When you have a really tight air gap, sometimes the motors are a little bit noisy, and in transition they might jerk a little. So it looks pretty typical air gap for this type of motor. So alright, let's put back that screw, and don't forget that brass washer. So alright, let's see what this motor can do on the thrust stand. Alright, so let's look at the thrust test results for the Brotherhobby Avenger V2 big motor, 2507 1200 kV. This one came in at 1200 kV, right on the dot. So Brotherhobby's main intent for these V2 motors, 2507, was so that they could be able to drive 7-inch props and keep the amps low, under 40 they said, at full throttle on 7-inch props on 6S. So that's what they were shooting for, and with the 1200 kV they were able to achieve that, no problem. As you can see here on the results here, quite good thrust at 1800, and amps are 29.5 on static thrust, so that means conservative it's gonna be about 30% lower amps flying, so that puts it at around 21 amps, which is quite good for these motors. So that shows the advantage of these big motors. They're able to drive larger props and maintain the amp draw manageable. So the purpose of keeping the amps low is of course to save the batteries so the motors don't become battery killers.
and so you're able to use the batteries for also for a longer time, and you avoid voltage sag. So those were the main goals for Brotherhobby for this motor, and it looks like they certainly achieved them. As you can see here on 7-inch props, the amps are quite manageable. Even on the 3-blade props right here, the 7035 and the 7056 by 3, 33 amps, so that's around 23 or so once in the air. So still well below 30. So on 6-inch, pretty respectable thrust here with a Gen Fan 6042. It's making above 1600 grams and with very manageable amp draw, as you can see here. It's only 26.7 on 6S, of course, so we gotta take that into account. Because of the low kV, I thought I'd throw in a larger prop. The only one I had was these 9-inch props. I actually wanted to try an 8-inch prop, but I didn't have any of those, so 9-inch props is what I used. So I have these MR 9045 and APC and the Master Air Screw 9045. These were donated by one of the YouTube viewers, Justin Markland, which I'm gonna use for a larger motor to test, but I thought I'd try them with this. And on the thrust stand, I was pretty surprised that the motor was actually able to drive them on 3S and 4S at manageable amps. On 4S, 31 amps. Once the props unload, it's gonna be even lower. But still, if you're gonna try this motor with these larger props, I would be careful. Just check motor temps, because it kind of seems that the motor would be too small for these props. But from the numbers, it looks like it should work okay on 9-inch anyways. So overall, this 1200 kV motor, quite capable, I think, for 6, 7, even 8-inch props, perhaps 9-inch props. As you can see, all the numbers are quite good as far as thrust and amp draw. So it's going to be interesting to see how people use this larger motor with this low kV and see what kind of builds they come up with on 6S. Alright, those are the results for this 1200 kV version of this motor. I'll have the 1500 and 1750 kV results out pretty soon, so keep an eye out for those. Thank you for watching, and until the next video.